Good morning, everyone. This is Jordan Gray from the Turtle Survival Alliance. Well, it's morning for me and everyone here in the Americas, but for you around the world, it might be afternoon, evening, or even getting late at night. I know my friend Pelf over there in Malaysia has been watching these webinars at around 11 o'clock p.m. So thank you to everyone who has woken up early, to everyone who has stopped in the middle of the day, and to everyone who is staying up late at night to check out these live TSA webinars. All right, lots of great questions already and a lot of people tuning in, so I really appreciate it. First and foremost, I do want to say that we at the Turtle Survival Alliance are thinking about everyone around the world who is dealing with all the pressures from the COVID-19 pandemic, whether that be medical, social, psychological, and of course, economic. We empathize with you, the Turtle Survival Alliance. As you may have read in last night's e-newsletter, a message from the president is undergoing our own impacts to our programs because of this pandemic. By the way, if you are not an e-newsletter subscriber, please go to our website, turtlesurvival.org, and become an e-newsletter subscriber so that you can keep up to date with a lot of the major events happening around our range country programs all around the world. Okay, so today, we are going to move on from Turtles 101 to now Turtles 201. This is the second part of a segment where we are teaching you some of the basics about turtles, because all of these things are really important before we start diving into webinars about our range country programs. When I say range country program, I mean programs that have been instituted in countries around the world to help protect and restore turtle and tortoise populations there. And we have an incredibly diverse array of programs. I want to create a webinar based on each of those programs, but first we have got to teach you some of the basics. So this is Turtles 201. And in Turtles 201, we are going to talk about a turtle's diet and their feeding strategies, including in that we're going to talk about the senses of turtles. We're also going to talk about how to tell the difference between a male and a female, some of the basics in the biology and morphology. And then, of course, after that, we're going to talk about reproduction. Now, originally, I wanted to talk about age and longevity in this webinar, but I decided that would actually be best pushed to the next webinar where we talk about various different issues. Now, before we go on into our webinar, I want to first quick look over here at everybody tuning in and just say hello. And again, thank you from the Netherlands, from South America, from Long Island, New York. There's Pelf again from Malaysia. We have people coming in from Savannah, Georgia. Fantastic. Love to see you all here. TURTLE power is TURTLE knowledge. All right. So before I go on, though, there is going to be a lot of these webinars coming out. I'm going to be working on a weekly webinar for everyone. I want to know, what do you want to learn about? In each webinar, I can come up with things that I get regularly asked about when I do outreach presentations or on social media, people ask various questions. But I want to know, what else can I base webinars around? We're going to continue doing some of the turtle basics. The next one will naturally be Turtles 301. And then we're going to move on to Turtles 401. Once we get into 401, we're really going to start talking about threats to turtles and how we can help mitigate some of those threats, or basically help to do what we can to lessen the impact on turtle populations around the world. But that doesn't mean that I don't want to build webinars based on your interests. So please, I will go back through the comments. I do every time to make sure I didn't miss anything. So please, in the comments, tell me about what you want to learn about. If you don't want to tell me in the comments because you want to provide maybe a little more in-depth perspective or kind of tell me why you want to learn about this, please email me right on the screen there at jgray@turtlesurvival.org. Check my email throughout the day. I've gotten numerous emails based on my past webinars. Some of those I am still responding to. There's quite a list to get back to. So, hey, thanks to everyone who has emailed me. I really love your support, love your questions, and I love that a lot of you are emailing me about how to get involved with turtle conservation where you live. All right, we got New Jersey in the house. I used to live for a little while in New Jersey. For all the New Jerseyans out there, it was exit 172 on the Garden State Parkway. You know what that means. All right, and Evans from Missouri, awesome. Boris asks, how about a webinar about keeping tortoises outdoors, enclosure, species, etc.? Boris, I think getting into some captive husbandry webinars is a really good idea because at the Turtle Survival Alliance, we mix ex situ, which means basically in captivity programs, with in situ, and in situ meaning in place, in their country of origin. So basing webinars off of proper turtle husbandry, I think is a fantastic idea. So thanks for that idea. All right. Oh, Chris says exit 130 here. Awesome, Chris. Hey, where's my invitation? Let's go to the Pine Barrens and look for some amazing animals. All right. So the first thing we're going to talk about today is what do turtles eat? This is a question I get all the time. And we have to break it down into three major categories. And there is some deviation in those categories. So for the first part, we're going to start with is the herbivores. So herbivores rely on primarily a plant-based diet. So let's think about some herbivorous turtles and tortoises. I can think of one primarily herbivore, the green sea turtle, Chelonia mitis, who feeds heavily on turtle grass, as it's aptly called, and other forms of aquatic vegetation. How about the sulcata tortoise, one of everyone's favorite tortoises around the world? The sulcata tortoise being native to Africa. This is a herbivore. Then we think of some turtle species who, as in their early life stages, are heavily carnivorous, but as they move into adulthood, they become primarily herbivorous. Some of the species in the river cooter family, the genus Pseudemes, or in their very closely related taxon, Trachemes, which are your sliders. I think most people around the world are very familiar with the red-eared slider, an animal I talked about adapting to environments all around the world in my last webinar. Boris would also like to know a webinar about the differences between the Testudo graeca subspecies. I think I'm going to pass that webinar on to my good friend Chris Leone at Garden State Tortoise. That guy is a master of the Mediterranean tortoises. Maybe we can figure out a way for Chris and I to do a webinar together on that. Chris, if you're watching, I just signed you up, buddy. Greg says, hoping spring is treating you and the turtles well. It's beautiful down here. We had some morning rains here in sunny South Carolina, where I'm coming to you from at our TSA Turtle Studios. But now it is gorgeous. We're having temperatures in the upper 70s to mid 80s, perfect for turtles. And I know going out into the woods in the evenings, I've been able to find various species of my favorite chelonians. Pelf says, what about a webinar on all the ecological, recreational, cultural, and economic roles of turtles? Pelf, that's a fantastic idea. How about you and I talk about that? Let's chat about it over email or WhatsApp. And I would love to create a webinar that's based on that. So fantastic question, and I look forward to talking to you soon. Also, I really would love to hear an update on what you're doing with the southern river terrapin this past nesting season. All right, Stephanie says it would be wonderful out of a webinar about what worked and did not work. That's fantastic. What worked and what did not work in your approaches in country, in Latin America and Asia, for example. All right, fantastic idea, Stephanie. And yes, after we get on to, we get past the threats and we get on to the mitigative activities that we take to help either sustain or restore turtle populations, that's going to be a focal topic. So really good. All right, so moving on from herbivores, let's talk about your omnivores. Most species of turtles can be characterized as omnivores. The reason I say that is because with your primarily herbivorous species, they will ingest animal material. Let's say you are a tortoise that's primarily an herbivore that's living in the grasslands of Africa, and you come across the carcass or the corpse of a dead animal. That tortoise is not going to give up that opportunity to get extra protein, extra calcium, and other nutrients. So in that instance, they're very much going to fit into that category of omnivores because they're going to be opportunistic. But a lot of your turtles, especially a turtle that I can think of that is a perfect example of an omnivore, are your box turtles. And whether that means the box turtles of the genus Terrapini or box turtles of the genus Cuora. So you're talking about your North American versus your East Asian genre of box turtles. Those are perfect omnivores. They're really opportunistic. They'll basically eat anything that they can find that's edible. Here in North America, whether that be grasshoppers or earthworms or blackberries, or I've even witnessed eastern box turtles, Terrapini carolina, eating birds, bird fledglings that have dropped to the ground and are still developing their flight feathers. So you're talking about an animal who is right there in between an herbivore and a carnivore, but will also be a fungivore, meaning that they will dine on various species of fungi as well. So think about your mushrooms. All right, so the next one we're going to move on to is your carnivores, your groups of turtles that are primarily carnivorous. If you look in the picture there, you're going to see an alligator snapping turtle. I think when people think of carnivorous turtles, the first thing that comes to mind is probably the snapping turtle. Now, the alligator snapping turtle is, yes, primarily carnivorous, meaning that it will feed and capture on live prey, as well as scavenge for carrion, or again, the dead body material of an animal. However, your Eastern snapping turtle or your Central American snapping turtles are very much omnivores. They're heavily scavengers. They do an amazing job at cleaning up our water bodies. So when you think of one of those snapping turtles, think of it as the vulture of the water. Vultures, as birds, do a great service to the environment by cleaning up the dead animal matter across the landscape. And snapping turtles are no less as important to the aquatic and semi-aquatic habitats in which they reside. All right, Ashley wants to know, she says her 7-year-old wants to know if turtles actually eat their own poop. He heard that in school. It sounds like a funny question, I know, but that's a legitimate question. And yes, turtles will eat the feces or poop of other turtles. Interestingly enough, for young turtles, eating the fecal matter of adult turtles in the environment is actually a way to help build the level of beneficial bacteria and basically probiotics in their digestive system. They can also recycle the nutrients that weren't maybe fully broken down by the previous animal. So the basic answer there is yes, turtles do eat poop. Let's see what else. Jonathan Sturgis wants to know, how do turtles breathe? All right, we're going to get onto that when we talk about our senses. That's a really good question, Jonathan. So my next slide, of course, just as I was saying, is we want to talk about the turtle skull, its morphology, and senses of a turtle. We can't really go into feeding strategies before we talk about that. So if you look at the diagram there, you're going to see that on the skull, turtles have an eye socket where they have eyes, okay, right here, just like us. And a turtle's vision is fairly acute. It's about on the level of a human's. Some turtles may have better vision than others, but there's a lot of other senses that come into play. If you move to the right from the eye, you will see that turtles have an opening in their snout called nares. And nares are nostrils. Okay, so just think of them as nostrils. Turtles do have a rather good sense of smell. When a lot of people do research on turtles, they will bait traps to lure the turtles in. And that is based on their ability to smell both underwater and out of water. So your terrestrial turtles and your aquatic turtles. Let's see, Batagira finis, which by the way is the southern river terrapin, asks, what do Menorrhea emys actually eat in the wild? So Menorrhea emys are, and I'm going to get to that next on feeding strategies, but Menorrhea emys, by the way, for everyone who's wondering, is the Asian giant tortoise, also called the Asian mountain tortoise. This species is a foraging species. They are an omnivore, and so they will eat all sorts of plant matter, including various species of fruits and fungi. And they will also consume animal material when it is available. Excellent question. There we go. The Kilonian Hut has some good answers written there. I do appreciate everyone helping out. It's really fantastic because I can't always catch every single question, or if I can and I'm moving on to something else, I love that you all are there to help each other because, hey, that's what the world and turtle conservation and loving turtles is about, helping one another. All right, so moving down from the nares, where the sense of smell comes in, or at least where the air comes in. Wait, I'm going to stop there. Let me go back to Jonathan's question. How do turtles breathe? So turtles breathe through their nose, through those nares. We as humans, we can breathe through our nose. We can breathe through our mouths. Turtles can breathe through their mouths, but you typically see this when there is some kind of medical condition with the turtle, such as an upper respiratory infection, and they're trying to get gasps of air in. But primarily, a turtle breathes through its nose. So great question, Jonathan. All right, next, moving down with the turtle skull, we have the beak. This is the Rhamphotheca. The Rhamphotheca is the keratin And again, if you missed out on last webinar, the keratin is the same material that makes up your fingernails and your hair and your skin. This keratin plate that overlays the bones is called the rhamphotheca, or the beak. Now, underlying that rhamphotheca, just like us, turtles have a maxilla, which is basically your upper jaw. Okay. Now, most turtles don't have a mustache covering their upper jaw, but whatever. And then they also have a maxilla, a mandible. And your mandible is the part of the skull structure that is movable, and that is able to create that crushing pressure or tearing ability. Let me see. Chris asked me, this is my first time catching your live stream. I really like this. Yeah, thanks, Chris. How often do you do these live streams? I'm now doing them weekly. So definitely make sure you either follow us on social media, follow updates on our YouTube channel, or get our e-newsletter to make sure you're up to date with these webinars. Angela then asked, why do box turtles eat birds? So box turtles are opportunistic omnivores. For the most part, they will eat anything that is edible, whether that is a bird or a frog or a slug or a snail. So they're very opportunistic, and that would be the reason why I've witnessed box turtles actually feeding on fledgling birds. So Paul Licht, PhD, says, from Berkeley, aquatic turtles can also breathe through the cloaca. Paul, you're absolutely correct. We covered that in the last webinar, talking about being able to absorb dissolved oxygen through their skin, through the cloaca, known to most people as butt breathing, but through the membrane called the cloacal bursa. We also talked about their ability to take dissolved oxygen from the water into their bloodstream via vascularized papillae in the larynx. So yes, you're absolutely correct. We covered that in the last webinar. But hey, it's always good to rehash things because some people might not have seen the last webinar. By the way, if you haven't seen it, go back, check out our last webinar. All right, so next from that, we're going to look at the cutting edge. Now, this is important because a lot of this has to do with the feeding strategies. So the cutting edge of a turtle's beak is called the tomium. And the tomium of various species of turtles might be different in structure. Some, like your grazing tortoises, will have a serrated edge. So think about the serrations on a knife or even the edges of a comb. So other ones will have these basically projections on the edge called cusps or tomiodonts. If Patrick Maldewan is out there watching, he's a tomiodont specialist. He wrote an incredible paper on the use of these tomium structures. Go out and search for it. Patrick Maldewan of the amazing country of Canada, a mythical place where only the hardiest survive and play hockey. And then let's now move on inside the mouth. Now, I know this picture doesn't show the inside of the mouth, but hey, I'm sorry, it's morning. Don't worry, I brushed my teeth. I'll show you the inside of my mouth. So right there on the inside of the mouth, you have this alveolar surface, which are referred to as the crushing plates. Now, above the bony layer of the mandible, you have a keratinaceous layer, which makes up these crushing plates. And that helps the turtle grind the food. It helps the turtle cut up the food. And these crushing plates can be very, very different in morphology, or the way they look, depending on the species. So one species of turtle that I think has the most incredible alveolar surface in their mouth is Pseudemys texana, which is the Texas cooter. They have numerous horny projections on their crushing plate for tearing up submerged leaf matter, because as adults they are primarily herbivorous. Another one that I can think of is a turtle like a female diamondback terrapin from the Gulf Coast. If I think about our Texas and our Louisiana diamondback terrapins, they develop these massive crushing plates inside their mouth as part of the mandible for being able to crush things like mollusks and crustaceans. Another turtle that comes to mind is that has this really sharp tomium, this sharp cutting edge, but also large crushing plates, is the big-headed turtle, Platysternon megacephalum, from Southeast Asia, a turtle that the Turtle Survival Alliance has worked with extensively over the years. All right, now let's go to hearing really quick. So a lot of people ask me, can turtles hear? And there's been more and more science behind the hearing ability of turtles. So turtles don't have an outer ear and an inner ear like we do, okay? We have these nice little flappy outer ears. It helps us funnel the sound waves into our inner ear. Turtles don't have this, okay? Turtles have an inner ear. They also have the Eustachian tube, but that inner ear is covered by a membrane. So when you look at a turtle, you're not going to be able to see that outer ear or even a hole that goes to the inner ear. What you're going to see is basically this roundish shape. If you look at the skin closely, you'll see it on the side of the face. It's in the subtemporal region, and that is called a tympanum. And the tympanum, if you can believe it, is actually the same structure that is on a drum. So think about the way that sound is produced in a drum. Okay, so something hits the drum, right? Typically a drumstick, and it produces vibrations across that tympanum, which then produce sound within the cavity below. And so that's the same general concept for which turtles hear. The sound waves are hitting that tympanum, and they are creating a sound within that inner ear. Now, more and more research are showing that many species of turtles, maybe all, have communication methods in which they're able to vocally communicate with one another, some on a frequency that we can hear, but some on a frequency that we cannot hear, but that is transmitted and received by the other turtles, deciphered, and is basically their own turtle language. If you really want to learn more about that, go ahead and research studies done in South America on Podocnemus expansa, the giant South American river turtle, and you're going to read a plethora of information about the incredible ability of turtles to communicate and to receive sound. Greg Robbins says, "Hey, Jordan, glad to see you." Hey, glad to see you too, Greg. Long time no see. Lucas says, "Amazing webinar. TSA making my quarantine cooler." Thank you, Jordan. Lucas, thanks so much. I really appreciate that. I love teaching people about turtles. And hey, I love these webinars, hopefully just as much as you do. So I can't wait to continue doing more. Kate Green says, "I remember when we had box turtles in the backyard and they would respond to us if we tapped on the ground." Kate Green, by the way, Kate Green's my mom, so we're not going to hide that. She's an amazing supporter of the TSA. So when I was growing up, maybe much to my mother's chagrin, I kept lots of eastern box turtles in our backyard, probably more box turtles than I really needed or should have had, but you don't learn those things till later in life. And so when it was feeding time, what we would do is go out, place the food in the middle of the yard, and then we would take our hands and drum on the surface of the ground. And what does that do? That creates vibrations through the earth. The turtles are able to pick up those vibrations through the pads of their feet, or if their shell, the plastron, the bottom shell, is touching the ground, and they're able to basically know from that rhythm that it is feeding time. Let's all come out of the bushes and congregate to feed. So, hey, Mom, thanks for bringing that up. All right, let's move on to feeding strategies. So like I talked about with our herbivores, you have some basically 3 categories on your herbivores. So we have your grazers. So that'd be mostly like your leopard tortoises, your sulcata tortoises. You have your browsers, which if you think about your Galapagos giant tortoises, especially the saddle-backed variety where the shell has evolved with this high, basically saddle in the front, the anterior of the shell, those are primarily browsing tortoises. They're lifting up to browse the leaf matter off of the various species of shrubs, bushes, and trees on the Galapagos. And then you have your foragers. And your foragers are kind of like think about your red-footed tortoise. It's a great example of a forager. They are moving throughout the forests and savannas of South America, looking for any type of fruiting bodies, plant material, and as a forest, primarily forest-dwelling tortoise, but they also do live in moist savannas. They are also do fit into that omnivorous category because they will routinely eat different types of animal matter. All right, so let's move over to our omnivores with their feeding strategies. So you have your hunters. You have your omnivores who are actively hunting. Think about your little baby painted turtle, okay? As they're moving through their little aquatic world, those are primarily carnivorous at that age, even though as a species they're omnivores. And so they are actively hunting for things like aquatic insects, tadpoles, maybe small fish, and other invertebrates. So let's see. Chris asks, isn't a Burmese star considered an omnivore? Chris, so Burmese star tortoises, again, they are primarily herbivorous, but going into what I was talking about before, they are opportunistic and so will feed upon animal matter should it become available to them. So you could kind of, put them in both categories, an herbivore and an omnivore. Great question. Omnivores also browse. They, as part of their strategy for consuming fruiting bodies or leafy material, just imagine one of these animals feeding up on fruits and foliage on different types of plant material. And then foraging. I've already talked about foraging extensively. This is the animal going throughout its habitat and opportunistically eating different edible plant, animal, and fungal matter. So that's pretty simple. Okay, so then moving on, our carnivores. So our carnivores. When I really think of carnivores, again, I think about alligator snapping turtles. I think of mata-matas. I think of snake-neck turtles. I think of soft-shell turtles and your turtles that are principally aquatic and who most of those are heavily piscivorous. So piscivorous means that fish is a large component of their diet, but they will, of course, eat other types of vertebrates and invertebrates like fish, excuse me, I already said fish, like frogs, like tadpoles, like crayfish. Some, like the alligator snapping turtle, will also feed on smaller turtles. We have seen in Texas the amazing Carl J. Franklin, who is a turtle biologist but should have been a WWE wrestler, has shown photos of large common snapping turtles or eastern snapping turtles with the telltale signs of an alligator snapping turtle crushing through its carapace, the top shell, once again. Stephanie asks, what is the largest prey animal you know of that was eaten by a snapping turtle? I think as far as eaten goes, so a lot of those prey items, that I know of, you're talking about some of your larger species of fish. Now, once you start getting to your larger species of fish, you're normally looking at dead fish, so fish that have already died. The turtle, using its sense of smell or through just visual foraging, will find these and eat them. But they have been, again, known to attack and eat larger species of turtles. So I think that would be my best answer there. Chris asks, are diamondback terrapins considered carnivorous? I know they eat a lot of fish and crayfish. Okay, so yes, I have the picture of the diamondback terrapin there because, yes, diamondback terrapins are primarily carnivores. They feed heavily on invertebrates as well as vertebrates. So they'll feed on shrimp, fiddler crabs, blue crabs, different types of gastropods. So your snails, they'll feed on your bivalves. So your things like clams and mussels, tube worms, a whole huge variety. But they will also ingest plant matter, typically in the form of algae on occasion. So that would put the diamondback terrapin primarily in your carnivore category. Lucas says there's a video of a snapping turtle hunting and killing a porcupine. Lucas, you got to tell, email me, send me that link. I want to see this. I want to see what you're talking about, because that would be pretty wild to see. All right, so really quick, now going on from hunting, you have your active hunters. So those are the ones, like I said, that are going around actively searching for food to eat, like crayfish, tadpoles, other small animals. And then you have your ambush hunters. So when you think of your mata-mata, when you think of your alligator snapping turtle, those are ambush predators who will typically lie in wait. Now the mata-mata, by the way, if you don't know what a mata-mata is, go look it up. It's this incredible looking animal. It looks like, some beast from Pirates of the Caribbean at World's End. It's like, a whole bunch of leaves and other debris all put together, and we call it a turtle. But mata-matas, who, by the way, they always look like they're smiling. It's the cutest thing. They have this incredible ambush strategy where they will lie in wait, blending in perfectly with their habitat. And then when they strike at prey, they actually create a vacuum which pulls that prey, whether it be a fish or some type of crustacean, into their mouth. Go look at videos of mata-matas feeding. Fascinating, awesome, incredible evolution for that species of South American turtle. And then we have our ones that lure. So again, alligator snapping turtle. They have this worm-like appendage inside their mouth that they actually will pump blood in and out of to create this wiggling action. And that wiggling action acts as some type of aquatic worm that fish are attracted to. Now, this animal is incredible. They will bite down with a estimated up to 1,000 pounds of bite pressure per square inch for your large alligator snapping turtles. And they bite down at about 1/100th of a second. And to catch fish using that strategy, you have to have that kind of speed and pressure. So again, it's incredible, incredible animals. All right, and then of course you have your foragers. Now, I've already told you what foraging is, so let's move on from this. All right, so we have people from Russia coming in. Hello from the United States. Juan wants to know, are Blanding's turtles, Blanding's turtles, so amazing. Are they considered omnivorous? Blanding's turtles are omnivorous, but they are highly carnivorous. So they feed heavily on things like frogs, crayfish, other types of invertebrates, and smaller vertebrates. Lucas sent the link. Thank you very much. All right, now let's move on. All right, we're now moving on into the next big question I get of how do you tell males versus females? And before I answer this, I want you all to give me some of your guesses. Just like if I was at an outreach event in public and people were raising their hands and shouting out, how do you tell a male versus a female? Let's just take a minute. I'm going to pause for you all to tell me what your guess is. How do you think you can tell males versus females? And while we're doing that, it is Thirsty Thursday. So I will once again take a sip of my delicious Coke Zero. Again, Coca-Cola. You should probably sponsor the Turtle Survival Alliance. All right. Here they come. They're coming in. Liza says eye color. Great guess. Claire says the shape of the plastron. Another excellent guess. Noah says in males, the cloacas are further to the plastrons than the females. Amazing guess. Lalaweta1 says see the tail. Dimeback Terrapin says large tail for a male and a small tail for a female. Excellent. Jean Hedrick says, or maybe it's Jean, says the cloaca location in relation to carapace edge. Excellent. Emily says the body size, tail length, and eye color. Those are all excellent guesses. I am Hedwig. Hello, Hedwig. Says tail length. Mary says depends on species, plastron bottom, front claws and red-eared sliders, tail size. Mary, I think you're onto something. In aquatic, always the tail size. Excellent. Chris says tortoises have concave plastrons. And Anna Green, spelled Greene, just as in the maternal side of my family. Hey, maybe we're related. Says it depends on the species. Seamus says the wasping of the shell. All right, those are all great guesses. Now I'm going to tell you. All right, so how do you tell males from females? Well, all species of turtle. So again, if you didn't catch the last webinar, throughout this, I'm just going to refer to them as turtles because tortoises, sea turtles, and terrapins are all turtles. They're all chelonians. Have some degree of what we call sexual dimorphism. So what is dimorphism? So your morphism, so that refers to the morphology or the genetically determined shape of the animal. And then di meaning two or multiple. So there are two morphologies relating to the sexes, the male having one, the female having the other. In some species, it is just drastic. The males and the females, which, by the way, I'm about to show you some drastic dimorphism in just a minute. Yes, don't worry, you're going to see some turtles. In others, it's very, very minute between the males and females. Pooja asks, do you have infographics that we could access based on this presentation? Characteristics, behavior, and so on. So this presentation will be on our YouTube channel to rewatch. If you want any of these infographics, please feel free to email me, jgray@turtlesurvival.org, and I'd be happy to share graphics with you. So great question. All right, so the basic gist of it, and a lot of you got it right, was that it depends on the species. When you talk about sexual dimorphism, in some species, females are gargantuan and males are tiny. Okay, let's go back to the last picture. Look at this. This is your northern map turtle. So this is Graptemes geographica, and the turtle on the right is the female. The turtle on the left is the male, and those are adults for the species. So this is marked size morphology seen in that species. So yes, just as people were saying, for some, you can eye color can help you tell males from females, but eye color can be somewhat subjective, especially with a lot of people in the world being somewhat colorblind to a certain degree. I know I am to a certain degree. That is not always the best way to tell. In some species, of aquatic species, like your painted turtles, your cooters, your sliders, the males have elongated foreclaws in which they use for courtship. We're going to talk about that in a minute. In other species of turtle, the males are much larger than the females, such as in your Galapagos giant tortoises. Males grow to hulking sizes, while females are much smaller than them, relatively speaking. All right. Chris wants to know, can we see some live turtles? All right, Chris, fine. I'll get to it. We're going to bring some live turtles out. But so basically, what I want you to do is just know that it depends on the species. So whatever your species you're interested in knowing the differences between the male and the female, you should research that species to find out the characteristics. Some have a concave plastron, meaning on the males that the plastron indents. There's all these different characteristics. One more that I do want to teach you about when I'm talking about sexual dimorphism is a dimorphic trait called sexual dichromatism. So dichromatism means that there are multiple colors expressed. So take a look at this page. That is the same species of turtle right there. And that is the northern river terrapin, Batagur basca, a species that is on the brink of extinction, but that the Turtle Survival Alliance and our partners are working with undaunted resolve to basically restore their populations. But this species, if you look on the left, you will see a male in breeding coloration, showing its very marked contrast from the female on the right. What's the easiest animal to compare this to? Well, I'd say some species of birds, where either the male is very, very brightly colored and the female drab, or in others, the female brightly colored and the male drab. So, okay, Chris and everyone else, I'll get some turtles out. Okay, here we go. All right, here we go. Turtles coming out. Don't worry, I'm coming back to the screen. All right, so let me flip them around as I drop stuff. All right, so these right here are adult northern diamondback terrapins. I might need to hold them back from the camera a little bit. This one here is an adult female, and this one here is an adult male. And you all can see how much smaller this adult male is. Oh, that female is scratching me. They do have sharp claws. Than the adult female. Now, if I were to compare them side by side, the female and the male's tail is actually about, okay, they both just peed on me. Whatever, the show must go on. What goes in must come out, and sometimes turtles pee. But these turtles' tails are actually about the same length when I compare them side by side. But what you want to look at is the relativity to the body size. So this male's tail relative to his body size is much thicker and longer than the female's. The male, his cloaca, which, by the way, the cloaca is the urogenital opening on a turtle. The cloaca is farther, should I say, from the base of the turtle's plastron, the bottom shell, whereas in the female here, even though at her large size she does have a fairly long tail, the cloaca, the urogenital opening, is much closer to the plastron. So that is your most general way to tell the difference between a male and a female. Again, it depends on the species. So that's where just doing your research in your free time, reading turtle books, and of course, getting out in nature, seeing turtles firsthand is the best way to be able to really build up a knowledge base for how to tell males and females apart of different species. Now I'm going to keep the female in my hand for a minute as we move on. All right. Amanda asks, can their characteristics change as they get older or larger? For instance, can the location of their cloaca change? Okay, so when they are hatchlings, turtles, for the most part, you really cannot tell a male from a female. They don't start expressing what's called their secondary sex characteristics until they become subadults. And those sex characteristics, again, are things like I mentioned. Oh my gosh, like she just really unleashed some pee on me. I don't think you all got to see that, but she really, now it looks like I wet my pants. Thanks a lot. But either way, so this female diamondback terrapin here, when she was younger, she had a relatively small tail. A male of the same species, when they're very young, would look relatively the same, but they do go through these shifts as they mature into their adult body plan, we'll call it. Okay, so Lalaweta1 asks, the color of male batagur changes during mating season. It is not the case all year, isn't it? That is absolutely correct. So the general how do I say scheme of the color pattern remains about the same during the whole year, but during non-breeding season, the male batagurs, so your roof turtles and your terrapins of Southeast Asia, the males will be much drabber in appearance during non-breeding season, and then during the breeding season, their pigment-producing cells start producing more pigments. You all should look up the genus of batagur. You can find a lot of pictures on our TSA social media. I mean, these male turtles during breeding season are like nothing you've ever seen. They're just incredible. I used to have, some of my very favorite genre of turtles here growing up in the United States. The more I've learned about the batagurs, I love these turtles. So yes, please check those out. Is she getting stressed? So yeah, she is a little bit stressed. So I'm going to just hold her up for another minute while I go on to my next slide, because we need to talk about the birds and the bees. So I'll put her down for just a minute so that she can relax while I talk about this. All right, so reproduction. So sexual maturity of a species depends on the species itself and different environmental factors. So for instance, that male northern map turtle that I showed you a minute ago in the picture, he could mature in just 2 years, for instance, maybe 3. That female is going to take several years longer to get to her adult size. A turtle in a northern climate will most likely mature at a slower rate than those that live in a southern climate where the growing season is longer. They're able to have greater metabolic activity, and food sources are available for a greater length of time. Now, maturation, so age to maturity, really doesn't depend on age. It has to do with size. So for whatever species that is, the size at maturity, whether for male or female, typically falls within a certain genetically decided range for that species. All right, going on from there, there are various courtship rituals and mating tactics. If you look at the animals in the picture, these are the Asian black giant tortoise. This is Menuria emys fayerei, a critically endangered species. And the males will do things like head bobbing. They will do vocalizations. They might butt up against the female, kind of ramming her to basically court her into mating. Other species, like I was saying earlier, some of your aquatic species with your long foreclaws, the males will actually go like this and tickle the face of the female so that to court her. In others, the males will just ram the females. In numerous species of tortoises, this will happen. The males will basically ram the females into submission. In other turtles, you have these very extensive courtship rituals characterized by lots of different pacing and swiveling, and the female leading the male on a chase until she finally decides that he is reproductively fit enough to be her mate. Boris then asks, is it known that females show male behavior as humping other tortoises and testudo species? 2 species that I have are doing this, whilst they are all outer signs that it should be a female. Okay, so yes, so females, I oftentimes in certain species will see more female to female aggression than male to female or female to male. Now, in other species, you will see a lot of male on male or male on female aggression. But Boris, as you noted, yes, females will be territorial towards other females, whether that be for maintaining their best feeding zone for all the best forage or grazing opportunities, or she is wanting to dissuade those females from mating with the most fit males. So yes, basically what I'm saying is you will absolutely see female on female aggression in various species of chelonians. Boris also asked, how long can females store sperm? All right, so I'm getting to that in just a second, Boris. Excellent question. So all turtles go through internal fertilization to reproduce. This is not unlike your cat, your dog, your human, your horse, your duck. They do undergo internal fertilization where the male mates with the female and passes spermatozoa to the female. So these are called the gametes. They're the cells. Now, what's really, really fascinating and what Boris was asking is about female sperm storage retention. You're talking about one of the most incredible evolutionary adaptations for a survival strategy. Okay, so imagine this female turtle doesn't come in contact with a male for 5 years. 10 years, even. They have the ability, for the most part, to store sperm for about up to 4 years. Now, during that sperm retention, typically the viability of the sperm decreases, but on the 4th year, the female can hypothetically lay, and they've been known to do so, fertilized eggs. So how do they do this? Okay, so females, and let me pull my female up for you really quick. So females have their cloaca here, and then they have a pair of oviducts. And the oviducts are on each side of the coelom, and your coelom is your body cavity. So they have a pair of oviducts. And within those oviducts, you have sperm storage tubules. And the females are able to store the sperm of one or more males. This is perfect reproductive strategy because a female's body is then able to actually choose the sperm from the most fit males to be able to fertilize their eggs. Now, she could just lay eggs that show single parentage from the male side, or she could lay a clutch of eggs that has multiple paternity. Or, again, like I was saying, say 3 years have passed, she hasn't come across a male of her species, she is able to actually pull those stored sperm to fertilize the eggs. It's absolutely incredible. We could do a whole entire webinar just based on that. All right, a lot of questions coming in. How long do Central Asian turtles live in captivity? So when you're saying Central Asian turtles, I'm not exactly sure what species you're talking about. So maybe if you could tell me the scientific name, Vova, that'd be great. Noah asks, is the use of sexual weaponry in males common amongst most turtles and tortoises? As in the recent paper published on Chrysemys picta in Algonquin Park, a few hours from where you live. So Noah, so my friend Patrick Maldewan and other research associates published that paper. Fascinating paper, love it. Some males will use those cusps or tomiodonts, as I talked about when I was talking about shell morphology, in sexual weaponry. Basically, not only fighting other males, but also basically subduing females into mating. Now, not all males do this. There are species of turtles that the males are non-aggressive for the most part. They don't show those kinds of basically weaponizing their mouth parts for reproduction. So that's a really good question. All right, so next thing I want to go to is the fact that females can store sperm for about up to 4 years with still showing viability. But what's also really incredible is that females can lay viable eggs up until the time they die. So whether a female turtle is 20 years old or 120 years old, she can still lay viable eggs. So that contrasts markedly with, I don't know, the human, in which the human reproductive system is not built for being able to reproduce into that late of life. All right, again, we could talk about so much about this, and maybe we should just do a whole entire webinar on reproduction. But of course, from reproduction comes egg laying. And I do have a few questions here that I'm going to ask you. All right, so first thing with egg laying is that generally, okay, all turtles lay eggs. That's not even generally, that's a fact. All turtles lay eggs. Now, some turtles lay hard-shelled eggs. Going back to your sulcata tortoise, your Burmese star tortoise, they lay hard-shelled eggs. And then you have your soft-shelled eggs. So a lot of turtles lay soft-shelled eggs. Now they're not soft like maybe the egg of an amphibian, but they are still soft when compared to the hard-shelled eggs. Now the formation and the laying of a relatively hard-shelled egg is, again, an amazing evolutionary trait of reptiles, birds, and two species of mammals that are in a group called monotremes, and those are the echidna and the platypus. But this is the ability for an embryo to grow in a protective environment without desiccation, or in lay terms, dehydration, and being able to incubate through the surrounding environment. All right, so my question to you all is, how long does it take for a turtle, the female turtle, to calcify a clutch of eggs? Okay, I just want to take some guesses here, and then I'm going to give you the average response there. Noah says, Patrick is a legend for sure. Heck yeah, Patrick, you better be watching. You got people calling you a legend on here. The Colonian Hut says, male chitra display aggressive behavior when they bite, and they bite the female's front fins to subdue and grip the mate. Yeah, absolutely. You will see some very aggressive behavior in your large soft shell species. Diamondback terrapin says that they calcify to full egg maturation in about a week. Okay, what's our next guess? I know we're now over an hour, so we're going to roll through this because I know you all may have some questions. But what are some other guesses you may have? I'm going to take a little sip of my delicious Coke Zero. So I'm getting some really good guesses. So this has to do with the eggs themselves, from going from just the fertilized ova to a fully shelled egg within the oviduct. So this is not incubation time, because I'm going to get to that next. Emily says, I feel like this is super dependent on the species. Emily, I always like that you are focused on that most answers are at the species level, because yeah, you are pretty much correct. But there is a pretty good general time here for the time it takes for maturation of fertilized eggs. All right, MJ said, just made it. I'll catch up later rewatching the broadcast, but glad to be here. Awesome. Chris says about 1 month inside the shell. All right, the answer here is from the time the females have produced mature follicles, so follicles being the fluid-filled sacs with yolk and the fertilized egg. When it is time to calcify those for egg laying, that process takes about 2 weeks. Now, this again is dependent on the species and some environmental factors, but generally it takes about 2 weeks to go from a non-calcified follicle to your calcified egg. And so for a lot of species of turtles who will produce multiple clutches in a season, there will be about a 2 to 3 week time lag in between nesting. Now, yes, that can also extend up to several months, as in some species. But for the general purposes of building that eggshell around the egg, it's about a couple to a few weeks. Emily says, fortnight calcification. Exactly. All right, so turtles can lay, they can lay 1 clutch of eggs, or they can lay multiple clutches of eggs. They might go for a couple years without laying a clutch of eggs. Again, it really depends on the species and what's going on in the environment at the time. Whether there's been heavy rainfall, or no rainfall, whether it's been a cool season or a hot season, whether food is in ample supply or food is scarce. But turtles can lay clutches anywhere from a single egg to, well, if I told you how many they can lay, that would give away the answer to the next question. But just so you know, turtles can lay multiple clutches depending on the species, and they can lay just one egg at a time, or they can lay multiple. So that brings me to my next question. Can you guess what species of turtle has the record for the most eggs laid in a single clutch? And I'm going to give you all just a minute here to give me answers to that question. Boris then asked, just by the way, is it in that period extra important to provide calcium in the food, or even so after those 2 weeks? So yes, during the period where a female is reproductively active, it is very important that she takes in enough calcium as well as is able to build calcium through vitamin D3 synthesis. So a reproductive female will typically have a reserve of calcium just for egg production. But in times where, again, food may be scarce, they might need to tap into more reserves of calcium. Or in times where food is plentiful, they might be able to get more of that absorbable calcium through their food supplies. Generally speaking, yes, calcium intake and storage and synthesis is extremely important during a female's reproductive time period, especially during egg laying and egg calcification. So I've been getting a lot of good guesses in. We have the sulcata, we have Dermocheles coriacea, the leatherback turtle. I keep getting leatherback turtle. Diamondback terrapin says the hawksbill sea turtle. We have the leatherback. Mary says a sea turtle for sure. I like that guess. Pelf asked, does the hardness of the eggshell depend on the food they consume? Very much the hardness of the egg is, it has to do with a lot of factors. It has to do with what genre they're in. So a lot of your, for the most part, your tortoise species lay hard-shelled eggs, while most of your, but not all of your aquatic species will lay relatively soft-shelled eggs. But again, there are a lot of aquatic species that also will lay a what's termed hard-shelled egg. All right, so got a lot of good guesses, and here's the answer. Whoever said hawksbill sea turtle, boom, right on the money. The hawksbill sea turtle is the sea turtle that has the record for the number of eggs laid in a single clutch, with several reports of over 200 eggs. So all great guesses. Again, thank you for staying with me. I know we're well over the hour mark, but hey, if you all want to keep learning, I'm glad to keep teaching. So thanks for hanging in with me here. So egg laying strategies. If you look at this picture here, this is of an Asian black giant tortoise, Manoria emys fairii, laying her eggs in a mound of leaf litter. That species of tortoise, the Asian giant tortoise, and its sister species, the impressed tortoise, Manoria impressa, are the only two chelonians that are known to actually build nests. So they will gather leaf litter and other debris and build mounds, much like, say, some species of crocodilians, in which they lay their eggs in the center of that mound. Other species are cavity nesters, and that is whereby a female will dig a cavity typically with her hind legs, her back legs, and then deposit the eggs and cover it up. Others are what we call cryptic nesters. So cryptic nesters, off the top of my head, bog turtles, okay, Glyptemes muhlenbergii, or many of your mud turtles, the Kinosternons. These are oftentimes cryptic nesters. Some of the other forest-dwelling species, like some of your Kuara species, like Kuara galbinifrons, Indo-Chinese box turtle, or your forest-dwelling rhinoclemes, the South American and Central American wood turtles are very much cryptic nesters. They will just deposit their eggs kind of lightly hidden amongst leaf litter or other debris. All right. Let me see. So what is the highest tortoise egg count and highest aquatic turtle, not sea turtle? So for the highest aquatic turtle, I believe that would be one of your Chytra species, and so your large narrow-headed softshell turtle species. For the highest tortoise egg count, I actually, off the top of my head, do not know the answer. If anybody out there does know the answer, please let me know. But most likely it would be for one of your larger species, like your Galapagos or Aldabra tortoise, your sulcata or African spur-thighed tortoise, or maybe your leopard tortoise. So I would love for somebody, yeah, I just don't know that one off the top of my head. So, hey, you know what, Chris? Maybe you should look it up and tell us all, because I would love to learn that right now as we all learn. Vova said that Russian border guards have seized more than 4,000 endangered wild tortoises after they were smuggled out of Kazakhstan. Just awful. Yeah, turtle and tortoise smuggling continues even now. And it is something that we at the TSA work so hard to try to stop. And if in cases where we cannot stop it completely, at least give proper veterinary, rehabilitative, and long-term care to those animals. All right, so the next thing I want to go on to is incubation. And then this is actually my final part of today's webinar. So incubation. Okay, so this is a chicken egg, by the way. All right, it's not a turtle egg, but it's a great example to show you with. So a female turtle will deposit these eggs, like I said, into a cavity in which she covers, or she might hide them amongst mosses, leaf litter, or other debris, as in the cryptic nesters, or like in the Minoria species of tortoises, they will deposit them within earthen mounds that they have built. But here's the general thing about an egg. So you have the outer egg shell, you have then an inner egg shell, and then a membrane, and then within you have your amnion, your chorion, and you have your yolk. This is, again, it's an incredible evolutionary reproductive strategy to be able to produce these eggs, because this is just a power-packed, well, it's a power-packed structure, okay? It's an egg. It gives everything that embryo needs to develop into a living, breathing turtle that, once it hatches out of the egg, is fully self-sustaining. So a lot of times I get a question of can a turtle egg be turned? All right. So when a female deposits the eggs in a nest cavity, she does actually turn the eggs into position with her hind feet, so that she can fit more eggs in, and then just properly move the eggs around into that cavity. During that time, the eggs are getting turned, they're getting tossed about, and even think about that egg dropping out of the cloaca into the nest. At that time, the embryo is still not fixed. Okay, so it's kind of floating around in there with the other parts of the egg. And now at that point also, it's a collection of cells. So it's not your turtle embryo that you're thinking of that grows into the fetus. For a matter of hours after the turtle lays its egg, one actually can, and I've put videos up showing this, one can actually move the egg around like such, whether that may be being to clean the egg or when you're translocating eggs from a nest. However, that's only within a very limited time period, because after that, the collection of cells at that point, as they're dividing rapidly, known as a blastocyst, will affix itself to the inner lining of the egg, typically on the dorsal or the top surface. Unlike a bird egg, in which the mother bird or father bird will turn as they incubate, a reptile egg does not get turned during incubation. And yes, some species of reptiles will show parental care during incubation. For the most part, turtles do not. So the egg will sit in place as it incubates. And during that incubation, the heat is transferred from the surrounding substrate. So no matter whether that's soil or sand or leaf litter or moss, the heat is transferred to the egg and incubation takes place. And so thereby, that incubation will cause the embryo to start forming. Now, what we do typically in the turtle research and conservation world is when we are moving eggs from a nest to an incubator, we will take a pencil and we will mark the top of the egg on the dorsal surface that it was found. So whether with an X or a number or maybe even the date. And then they are typically placed into an incubation chamber like you see there on the screen, where they will remain in that position for the duration of their incubation. But here is something incredible. All right, yes, the turtle embryo is for the most part affixed to the inner membrane. However, as that embryo starts to grow, they can actually self-migrate through the egg for thermoregulation. I have seen them at only 2 weeks old. You're talking about this tiny, tiny sliver of a turtle, it looks like. Basically, they will move to different parts of the egg to thermoregulate as they grow. And this is why sometimes turtles will hatch out upside down. I have seen many, many times where a turtle embryo will affix itself to the dorsal surface or the top surface of an egg and then hatch upside down. How does that happen? Well, that is through motility of that embryo to be able to move around along the inner lining of the egg to an area where it will thermoregulate properly for development. The Colonian Hut says, don't fly river / pig-nosed turtles go through a diapause? So excellent question. So yeah, so we're going to get to that in just a second. So far, this is the longest webinar we've done, but I hope you all are enjoying it. And again, if you've needed to stop because we've been going for a while, you can always come back to our YouTube channel or to our webinar archive on the TSA website to rewatch these webinars so you can pick back up where you left off. But so as an egg incubates, that hatchling, the sex of it is determined by either environmental or chromosomal sex determination. So many species of turtles undergo environmental sex determination in the form of temperature sex determination, while others undergo a sex determination utilizing chromosomes the same way as people do. So whereby the double X chromosome from the female and the XY chromosome from the male will go through a period of change during cellular division to decide the sex of the offspring. Now, during, so let's see, Chris says, the Burmese black mountain tortoise laid 68 eggs, and that's the record. Awesome. Chris, thanks for looking that up for me. So I really appreciate it. Again, I love you all helping each other out and helping me out when I might not know an answer. All right, so let's talk about that temperature sex determination. So temperature sex determination has two main types, and that's TSD1 and TSD2. So in TSD1, at one polar end, males will be produced, and at the other pole, females will be produced. Now, throughout that range, each time you change a degree, the expected outcome of male to female ratio will change per degree. Now, in some cases, it's a large change. In some cases, not. Once you get to the middle of those poles, is when you will typically see a mixed clutch, so a clutch of males and females. However, let's say in our incubators, we're incubating, let's say, diamondback terrapins. Weird that I like to talk about those turtles. But diamondback terrapins at 86 degrees Fahrenheit or 30 degrees centigrade. At that temperature, we have found them to come out 100% female. Okay, now let's drop it to 10 degrees lower. Let's go to 76, 77 degrees Fahrenheit, or about 24.5 to 25 degrees centigrade. At that level, they have all come out male based on our studies. So then what is temperature sex determination 2? All right, so and then Chris is also bringing up high temps is associated with female and low temps in male. And yes, that is generally true for chelonians, whereas in higher temperatures for female and lower temperatures for male. Now, that is not the case for all temperature sex determination in reptiles, but for the chelonians, yes, that's a great point, Chris, to bring up. All right, so another question I had is, what causes the embryo to know it's time to affix to the side of the egg once it is no longer inside the turtle? Oxygen permeating through the shell of the egg. So yes, there are hormonal changes from when the egg is passed through the oviduct into the cloacal opening, out the cloaca and into the nest. And like you're saying, now the egg is exposed to oxygen. So those triggers will cause a change within the egg, basically cueing that collection of egg cells, the blastocysts, to affix to the side of the wall to begin development. Again, reproduction and incubation, I could do a whole webinar on this. I could talk so much about it. There's probably so many questions you have. But the last thing I'll say is temperature sex determination 2, and what is it? So TSD2 is where you have basically females produced at the very low ends of the temperature range for incubation and at the very high ends. And then in their middle is where males are typically produced. For people who are familiar with the genus Sternothrus, your musk turtles. Musk turtles exhibit this temperature sex determination 2, where females are produced at your highest and lowest ends, and your males are produced right there in the middle at about 25 degrees centigrade, or about 77, 78 degrees Fahrenheit. Yes, so some species undergo a diapause during incubation. I've already realized how long I've talked about incubation because it is fascinating. It is complex. There's a lot of stuff I haven't gotten to. But yes, some species undergo a diapause. So what is a diapause? A diapause is a interruption in development. So why does diapause happen? Well, diapause happens typically for environmental or reproductive strategies in which the hatchling will then come out of the egg and emerge from the nest at the appropriate time where growth predicated by rainfall and the new growth of lush vegetation, or the rainfall and the rise of waters is beneficial to the survivorship of that hatchling. So some species that undergo diapause, for instance, your spider tortoises in southern Madagascar will oftentimes undergo a diapause, so an interruption in the development of that egg. The Hecate, or Central American river turtle, will oftentimes undergo a diapause as the rainy season brings water over the nest cavity. Because while that water is over the nest cavity, it would not be possible for that embryo to mature to its hatching size as your oxygen levels change with the increase in water and water pressure inundating the nest chamber. The fly river turtle, or pig-nosed turtle, as was brought up by Lucas, that's another one that will undergo diapause, and hatching is typically triggered by submersion underwater. So when the rainy season begins and the egg chambers that were laid in sandbars along the rivers are inundated, that inundation will trigger the hatchlings to emerge from their eggs. We're going to talk about that more in the next webinar 301, which is about hatching. And then lastly, incubation duration depends on the species and other environmental factors. So some species will incubate for about 2 months, others maybe even just as long as a month and a half, while some species may incubate for 8 or more months. It really depends on the species and those environmental factors. Again, so much we can talk about with incubation, but in the interest in time, I want to move on to what might be some of your other turtle questions. So I'm just going to pause a minute because I know you all have been asking throughout this period. Again, you all can always come back to this webinar whenever you want because it is on YouTube, because maybe there's a question that somebody asks that other people have not been able to watch because they had to go to other activities, or maybe they just got tired of the sound of my voice, which I totally understand. All right, so if there's any questions out there, feel free to ask them about some of the topics we have covered. In that time, I will take a delicious sip of my Coca-Cola Zero. Again, Coca-Cola, please sponsor the TSA. All right. So I'm not getting really any questions in right now. It's probably because most people have asked their questions already, or I've already covered them. Oh, they're coming in now. Of course, right as I say that, there is a delay on this. So let's see. Is egg compaction a captivity problem. So when you say compaction, do you mean that eggs collapsing? What exactly do you mean by compaction, Mary? I'll get back to that, but let me go in. Gravid Indo-Pacific hawksbills, Irenmachelys imbricata bisa, do visit some beaches in Singapore and her surrounding southern islands to deposit their eggs. During a trip, I assisted with one nest that contained 75 eggs. Sean, that's awesome. I'm really glad you got a chance to be able to get involved with a project like that and also see just the amazing amount of eggs that hawksbill turtles will lay. So although they are not the largest of the sea turtle, they do lay the largest single clutch sizes of any of the sea turtles. So the Colonian Hut asks, is Chitra javanensis a different bloodline subspecies of the regular Chitra? So I personally am not well versed in Chitra. That is an answer that, or a question that I would love to pose to some of my colleagues and associates in Southeast Asia. If Pelth is still on here, is from Malaysia, she may be able to answer that. If not, I'm going to get back to you on that question because I have not brushed up on Chitra lately. Again, there are 468 living species of turtle and tortoise on Earth. Well, excuse me, taxa, so species and subspecies. So, and those, new subspecies are being described. Some are being elevated to species level. And so keeping up with all of them, it can be difficult. So I apologize to say that I can't exactly answer that Chitra question right now. I Am Hedwig asks, would you recommend adding fungi to a captive box turtle diet? Yeah, we do it at our Turtle Survival Center all the time. We typically use white or portobello mushrooms. We get those from Limehouse Produce. Shout out to Limehouse Produce in Charleston, South Carolina, who donates the produce to our facility for turtle and tortoise consumption. So yeah, adding some, your white mushrooms, your portobellos would be a great thing to be able to add to your box turtle diet. Now, a species like the ornate box turtle may or may not eat that. At the species level, ornate box turtles are generally more carnivorous than their eastern counterparts in the Terrapini Carolina group. But hey, you could always try. Mary means compacted internally and not laid. Okay, so Mary's question was, is egg compaction so we typically refer to that as impaction, where the eggs are retained and not laid. Is it more common in captivity? Well, there's two ways to look at that. Egg impaction can, in certain circumstances, lead to the death of the female. If this happens in the wild, generally we wouldn't know about it. But in captivity, there are many, many cases of egg impaction. That can be due to the improper formation of the pelvic girdle in the female, improper formation of the female's carapace, so that it doesn't actually allow for room enough for the female to pass the eggs through the cloacal opening. Which side tangent there, going into proper turtle husbandry. That's why it's so important to research, to ask others, and to gain as much knowledge on the species of turtle you have and are caring for, because something as simple as how you grow a turtle can very, very much impact their ability to reproduce properly and their longevity further down the line. So that's a really, really great question. What does Turtle Survival Alliance do in Russia? So we don't actually have programs in Russia. If you would like to talk to me personally, please email me at jgray@turtlesurvival.org, and we can talk about some turtle programs in the region. Where does TSA get their sponsoring from, if not Coca-Cola? I know, I'm really leaning on Coke here, right? So we at Turtle Survival Alliance get our funding through zoos and aquariums, so zoologic institutions, from universities and the private sector, as well as grants. Also other NGOs. So what I'm trying to say is we get our funding from many different avenues. Now, right now, the TSA is struggling financially in some areas with our field programs, just as everyone is right now. Donations are fewer and farther between right now. We're projecting to get less money from different zoologic institutions and nonprofits, all related to the COVID-19 pandemic. So each dollar counts towards going to help turtles and tortoises. So just so you know, yes, we at the TSA, we do not make money from selling turtles and tortoises. We get our money from the generous support of institutions, NGOs, and the private sector. Let's see. How do wild turtles make sure they get males and female offspring to ensure population doesn't become unbalanced? Okay, so really good question. There are different strategies. So let's say the animal is chromosomally sex determined. All right, the animal really doesn't have control over whether the ratio of males to females there. So in some species, however, who are demonstrate temperature sex determination, there can be a level of determining the population outcome. I kind of fudged those words, but I'm sorry. What I'm trying to say is when you look at a cavity dug into the soil, the eggs at the bottom of that cavity are, for the most part, going to incubate at a slightly different temperature than the eggs at the very top of the cavity. Okay, and that might only be a half of a degree. It might be 1 degree. It might be several degrees. So within that clutch, the eggs may hatch out male or female just based on their positioning within the cavity. Or let's say that the turtles recognize that there is a imbalanced sex ratio in a population. The turtles could choose to nest in a shadier area, thereby having the eggs incubate at a lower temperature. Or they could choose to nest in a sunnier location, so that if the population is possibly male heavy, that they could create more females. So that is strategies that turtles can employ to help balance the population of the sexes. All right. Do we have any evidence that global warming is harming turtles via imbalanced sexual selection in eggs? My understanding is that sex selection is temperature-based. So yeah, so for many species, sex selection is temperature-based. We call that environmental sex determination or temperature sex determination. There have already been studies that show, and this is primarily in sea turtles, that climate change and the change in just a degree to 2 degrees in some latitudes is causing bias in those populations. Now, that could be very, very detrimental to some of these populations of temperature sex determined species in the future. So the question is, will this animal that's based on 200 some years of evolution be able to adapt quick enough so that the temperature sex determination will adapt through a thermal gradient with the ever-evolving climate? Only time will tell. So please, stay tuned for more scientific evidence and research to come out of that hypothesis. Chris, how can I get involved with helping out the TSA? I'm going to get to that actually in just a second. Lucas, any plans, projects for TSA in Brazil? You would be very welcome here. All right, so Lucas, we have partners and associates in Brazil that work with the large river turtles, notably Podocnemis expansa, your giant South American river turtle, as well as Podocnemis unifilis, which is your yellow-spotted Amazon river turtle. We also work with one of your side neck species down in Brazil, in southeastern Brazil. So we already are involved in that country, not to the level that we are in some of our other countries, but just so you know, we have very, very close research associates and TSA supported programs in the country of Brazil. Personally, I would love to come down and get involved in Brazil somehow. How long do Central Asian turtles live in captivity? So if you're talking, when you talk about Central Asian turtle, if you're talking about Testudo horsfieldii, the Central Asian tortoise, or the Horsfield's tortoise, or also known as the Russian tortoise, they have lots of names. They can live for numerous decades in captivity. This is one of the most popular turtles in captivity. Sadly, what I do want to say there, though, is that when you go to your major chain markets, supermarkets, not supermarkets, but pet markets, or other pet distributors, your Testudo, no, excuse me, I just said Testudo, Agrionemes horsfieldii, they were moved into the genus Agrionemes. They are, for the most part, wild-caught turtles from your Central Asian countries like Tajikistan and Uzbekistan, as well as Kazakhstan. So please, do your research before purchasing animals like this, because for the most part, your Central Asian tortoise or your Russian tortoise is unfortunately caught in the wild and then exported for sales domestically in other countries. So PPVD says that yes, Chitra chitra javanensis is a different subspecies from the typical subspecies Chitra chitra. So hey, PPVD, I don't know who you are, but thank you very much for helping me out with that right now. Because again, Chitra chitra is not a species that I have personally worked with or studied to a great extent. I'm sure right now my colleague Chris Hagen, who is Turtle Yoda, we call him, is probably shaking his head at me right now for not knowing that answer off the top of my head. Hey, whatever, Chris, get over it. All right, so I think lastly, what I want to say is please stay tuned for our next Turtles 301. I will take into account the ideas that you had for a webinar. We are approaching 2 hours for this webinar, and a lot of that is based on your questions. So thank you so much for asking questions. Thank you for staying engaged. I love talking to you. I could talk to you all day, every day about turtles. It's my favorite subject to talk about. So in Turtles 301, we are going to move on from incubation to the most beautiful sight of all, and that is hatching. We will then talk about the natural history of those hatchlings and juveniles, moving on to the growth of the turtle. And then this is where I have moved age and longevity too. So we're going to be talking about all those in Turtles 301, which will actually happen the week after next. And the reason for that is, and I'm going to plug this here, is next week I have been asked to be the opening presenter for the National Biodiversity Teach-In. It is a teach-in that is through Elgin High School in Elgin, Illinois. It will be viewable live on YouTube all across the world. And through this format, they see tens of thousands of viewers. So I'm really excited. I'm really honored. Next Thursday, 11 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time to be part. 11 o'clock Central Time, so 12 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time to be a part of that. So check out our TSA social media and website so that you can keep up to date with that National Biodiversity Teach-In. All right, moving on. Again, if you want to learn more about turtles, pick up a turtle book. How do you think I learned about turtles starting from a young age? It was picking up these turtle books. I would say the most influential on me was the Handbook of Turtles by Archie Carr. I still read it to this day. My coworkers will tell you that I will fall asleep reading this book with it on my lap. No matter how many times I read it, I always find something new. It is an incredible, incredible book. But that doesn't mean other ones like Year of the Turtle by David Carroll, Encyclopedia of Turtles by our beloved Peter Pritchard, or Turtles of the World by Carl Ernst aren't incredible books. So please pick up a turtle book, read it. There's nothing better than having a real book in hand, flipping through the pages and being able to process and store away that information in the brain. Follow us on our TSA social media. We update it multiple times daily. You can ask questions there, and we will make sure to answer it. It's also a way to share turtle information. Volunteer with a turtle project. I know that's difficult right now, but if you get the chance, go to turtlesurvival.org, go to Get Involved and Volunteer, and that will typically lead you to an email to me, which is the next bullet point. If you have any more questions or want to get involved, email jgray@turtlesurvival.org. So a lot of people are saying thank you. Mary asks, what's the status of the conference in TSA in August? Mary, I can just say right now, everything is we're doing negotiations. We don't have a firm response to our supporters right now that we would like to have, but it's just falling in line with everything else with the COVID-19 pandemic, in that it is a constantly evolving situation. So we hope to give a firm answer to all of our supporters, because that's a conference that we love putting on and our supporters love attending. So a lot of people are saying, thank you all again. I really appreciate you all staying with me. Just something as simple as the thanks really means something to me. Chris, so Turtles 301 will be not next Thursday, but the Thursday after, because next Thursday I will be presenting on the National Biodiversity Teach-In. So stay tuned on or pay attention to our TSA social media so that you can get the link to the National Biodiversity Teach-In, so you can check out that webinar and show your support for turtles. And then lastly, how else can I get involved because I love turtles? Check out the 10 ways you can help turtles. That's on our TSA website in our blog. Volunteer with a turtle program. please become a TSA member. There's no better way to help our turtle programs and save turtles from the brink of extinction than becoming a TSA member and a TSA supporter. Okay, we rely on our followers, our supporters, and the people who love turtles to do the work that we love to do, and work that makes a meaningful and long-term impact on turtle populations. Again, check us out on social media. I don't need to stick here very long. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, @TurtleSurvival. And again, a dog riding a tortoise. So thank you all very much for tuning in. Again, National Biodiversity Teach-In next Thursday, and then Turtles 301 the Thursday after that at 11 o'clock. I really appreciate you all tuning in. And please, Pell says, I want to get the pints. Hey, everybody, our web store is open right now. Emily Kiefner, the brave and unfallible Emily Kiefner, is at our main office holding it down. If you make a purchase in our web store, that is one way in which you can continue supporting our turtle programs and the Turtle Survival Alliance while getting some cool gear. Lots of kinds of shirts, hats. We have these new silly pints that are flying off the shelf. So please check out our web store. Emily will be glad to send that item right to your door. All right. So thank you all very much. TURTLE power, and I will see you next time.